Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. The structure was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It looked like a giant crystal flower floating in space, with smooth curved arms that stretched out in perfect symmetry. Soft blue lights pulsed along its surface in a rhythm that seemed almost like breathing. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's xenobiologist. He stood beside Sarah, his eyes wide with wonder. "They call it Harmony Station. It's where the galactic confluence conducts first contact with new species." Sarah nodded but kept her expression neutral. As Earth's first ambassador to make contact with alien life, she had to be careful. Everything she said and did would be recorded and studied. The weight of representing all humanity pressed down on her shoulders. "Incoming transmission, Captain," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. "They're speaking perfect English." On screen, Sarah ordered. The main display showed a being unlike anything from Earth's imagination. It stood tall and graceful, with skin that looked like polished silver. Its face was elongated with large purple eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. When it spoke, its voice was melodious and calm. "Greetings, children of Earth," the being said with a warm smile. "I am Veltar of the crystalline hegemony. On behalf of the 847 species of the galactic confluence, I welcome you to the greater community of consciousness." Sarah stepped forward. "Thank you, Veltar. I am Captain Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth Space Command. We are honored to meet you." "The honor is ours," Veltar replied. "We have waited so long for this moment. Your species is the final piece in our great work. Soon the galaxy will know perfect harmony." Something in those words made Sarah feel uneasy, but she kept her diplomatic smile. "We look forward to learning about your civilization, and we are eager to share it with you. Please dock with our station. We have prepared a special reception for humanity's arrival." As the Defiance approached the docking bay, Sarah gathered her diplomatic team. Besides Dr. Webb, she had brought Commander James Park, a military advisor, and Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, a cultural specialist. Each of them had trained for years for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to see. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold 50 ships the size of the Defiance. But what struck them most was the activity inside. Hundreds of different alien species moved around the bay, but they all moved together, not in formation like soldiers, but in perfect synchronization, like dancers who had practiced the same routine for years. "My God," whispered Dr. Rodriguez. "They're all moving in harmony." Veltar met them at the airlock with a group of other aliens. Each species looked completely different. Some were tall and thin, others short and round, some had fur, others had scales or smooth skin. But they all had the same peaceful expression on their faces, the same calm look in their eyes. "Welcome to Harmony Station," Veltar said as he led them through corridors filled with soft, pleasant music. "This station represents everything the confluence has achieved. 847 different species, working together in perfect unity." The tour that followed was amazing and disturbing at the same time. They saw vast gardens where aliens from different worlds tended plants together without speaking, each knowing exactly what the others needed. They watched construction crews build new sections of the station, with each worker moving like part of a single organism. "How do they coordinate so well?" asked Commander Park. "Through the Great Resonance," Veltar explained proudly. "It is our greatest achievement. A psychic network that connects every mind in the confluence. We share thoughts, emotions, and purposes. Individual wants and needs that create conflict are smoothed away. We think and feel as one." Dr. Webb leaned forward with interest. "You mean you can read each other's minds?" "More than that," Veltar said. "We share minds. My thoughts become their thoughts. Their feelings become my feelings. The boundaries between self and other fade away. It is the most beautiful experience in the universe." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What about individual choice? Personal freedom?" Veltar looked puzzled. "Choice implies conflict. Freedom implies selfishness. These are primitive concepts from before Enlightenment. Why would anyone choose suffering when they could choose harmony?" The group was taken to the station's central chamber, a massive sphere where representatives from hundreds of species sat in concentric circles. At the center stood a tall spire made of some unknown crystal that pulsed with the same blue light they had seen outside. "Behold the heart of harmony," Veltar said with reverence. From here, the great resonance reaches across the galaxy, connecting every world, every mind, every soul in our alliance. As they watched, the aliens in the chamber began to hum in unison. The sound was beautiful and haunting, with hundreds of different voices blending into one perfect note. The crystal spire glowed brighter, and Sarah could swear she felt something trying to touch her mind. "We would like to offer humanity this gift," Veltar continued. "Membership in the Confluence. An end to your wars, your crime, your suffering. Perfect peace through perfect unity." The human delegation exchanged glances. This was the moment they had discussed and debated during the long journey from Earth. How should humanity respond to such an offer? Sarah took a deep breath. "We are honored by your offer, Veltar, but we need time to consider it. This decision affects our entire species." Veltar's expression remained calm, but something flickered in his purple eyes. "Of course, we understand that primitive species often fear what they do not understand. We will give you time to see the benefits of harmony." "We appreciate your patience," Sarah said carefully. "But I should mention that many humans value individual thought and choice. We might not be ready for this level of unity." For the first time, Veltar looked genuinely confused. "But surely you can see the benefits? No more war. No more hunger. No more loneliness or despair. All the problems that plague your species would disappear, along with the things that make us human," Commander Park said quietly. "I do not understand," Veltar admitted. "What could be more important than peace and happiness?" Dr. Rodriguez spoke up. "Growth, change, the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them, the right to disagree and find new solutions. But these things cause suffering," Veltar protested. "Disagreement leads to conflict. Mistakes lead to pain. Growth requires struggle. Why choose these when you could have perfect contentment?" Sarah realized that they were facing a fundamental difference in philosophy. The Confluence saw individual consciousness as a disease to be cured. Humans saw it as the essence of life itself. "We will consider your offer carefully," Sarah said diplomatically. "But we must return to Earth to discuss this with our people." Veltar nodded, though he still looked puzzled. "Very well. We will await your decision, but please do not take too long. The galaxy has waited eons for completion. Soon every voice will join the eternal song of harmony." As the human delegation prepared to leave, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had just encountered something beautiful and terrible. The Confluence had achieved something amazing, a galaxy without war or suffering. But at what cost? The question that worried her most was simple. What would happen if humanity said no? Back on the Defiance, as they undocked from Harmony Station, Dr. Webb stared out at the peaceful alien structure. "They've created paradise," he said softly. "Have they?" Sarah replied. "Or have they created the most beautiful prison in the universe?" The journey back to Earth would take 3 months. 3 months to decide the future of humanity. 3 months to choose between the chaos of freedom and the peace of surrender. The galaxy sought harmony, but Sarah Chen suspected that humanity would refuse to yield. 6 months had passed since the first contact with the Galactic Confluence. The debate on Earth raged like wildfire through every news channel, government building, and family dinner table. President Elena Vasquez stood before the United Nations Assembly, knowing that her next words would shape humanity's future. After careful consideration of the Confluence's offer, she began, "The United Earth government has reached a decision. We thank the Galactic Confluence for their generous invitation, but we must respectfully decline membership at this time." The assembly erupted in mixed reactions. Some delegates cheered, others looked horrified. Around the world, millions of people watched the broadcast with everything from relief to rage. Within hours, Veltar's response arrived from space. His holographic image appeared in the UN assembly, his silver features showing genuine confusion. "We do not understand," he said, his melodious voice carrying across the chamber. "Perhaps we did not explain clearly enough. We offer you an end to all suffering. Why would you choose chaos over harmony?" President Vasquez stood to respond. "We appreciate your concern for our welfare, Veltar, but humanity believes that freedom of thought and individual choice are worth the risks they bring. But your news broadcasts show us your wars, your poverty, your crime," Veltar replied. "Families torn apart by disagreement. Nations fighting over resources. Why preserve these when you could have peace?" Dr. Marcus Webb, now serving as Earth's chief xenobiologist, had been one of the loudest voices supporting integration with the confluence. He requested permission to speak. "Mr. President Veltar," Webb said, "many of us see the wisdom in your offer. Could you show us more of your worlds? Help us understand what we would gain?" Veltar's expression brightened. "Of course. We had hoped you would ask. We invite delegations from Earth to visit our core worlds. See with your own eyes what harmony can achieve." Over the following months, the Confluence launched what they called the Enlightenment Campaign. Ships arrived in Earth's solar system, not as invaders, but as teachers. They offered free tours to anyone who wanted to see their civilization. Dr. Webb led the first delegation to Crystallis Prime, homeworld of Veltar's species. What they found there defied every human assumption about civilization. The cities were works of art that stretched across continents. Towers of living crystal grew from the ground like trees, connected by bridges that sang in the wind. Millions of crystalline beings moved through the streets, but there was no traffic, no accidents, no disorder. Everyone knew exactly where they needed to be. "Watch this," Veltar said as they stood on an observation platform. He gestured toward a massive construction project below. Thousands of workers were building a new district, but there were no supervisors, no blueprints, no arguments about what went where. "How do they coordinate without talking?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, a neuroscientist who had joined the delegation. "They share purpose through the Great Resonance," Veltar explained. "Each worker knows the grand design because they all think as one. No wasted effort. No mistakes. No conflicts over different visions." The delegation visited the planet's universities where research was conducted by minds linked across dozens of species. Scientific problems that would take human teams years to solve were completed in days by collective intelligence. They saw art galleries where paintings and sculptures were created by thousands of minds, working in perfect harmony. The beauty was breathtaking, but something about it bothered Dr. Rodriguez. "It's also similar," she whispered to Dr. Kim. "Different styles, but the same underlying feel, like they're all expressions of the same mind." "Because they are," Veltar said, having overheard. His hearing was much better than human. Individual artistic vision creates chaos and confusion. Shared vision creates true beauty. The next stop was Verdania, a world that had joined the Confluence only 100 years earlier. The delegation met Zara, one of the few beings who still remembered life before integration. "We were like you once," Zara said. She looked humanoid but had green skin and leaves instead of hair, always fighting, always disagreeing. "Our world was dying from endless conflicts." "What changed?" Dr. Webb asked. "The Confluence offered us peace. At first we resisted like you, but then we saw the wisdom. Why struggle when you can simply let go?" "Do you miss anything about the old days?" Dr. Kim asked carefully. Zara paused, and for a moment her eyes seemed distant. "Sometimes I dream of something. Feelings that were mine alone. Thoughts that belonged only to me. But these are just echoes of primitive thinking. The resonance shows me better ways." That night Dr. Kim couldn't sleep. She had brought instruments to measure brain activity, and the readings from the Confluent citizens were disturbing. Their minds showed patterns she had never seen before, as if individual personality had been smoothed away like rough edges on a stone. Meanwhile, on Earth, the debates grew more intense. Dr. Webb returned as a passionate advocate for joining the Confluence. "You didn't see what I saw," he argued in interviews and debates. "Perfect cooperation. No waste, no suffering. They've solved every problem that has plagued civilization since the beginning of time." Admiral James Harrison, now head of Earth's Space Defense Force, disagreed strongly. "They've solved those problems by eliminating the people who had them. What they're offering isn't improvement, it's replacement." The division spread through human society like a crack in glass. Families split apart as some members wanted to join the Confluence while others refused. Protests filled the streets of major cities. Some carried signs reading "Choose Harmony," while others demanded freedom of mind. Dr. Webb formed the Human Integration Movement, arguing that resistance was selfish and primitive. "We have a chance to end war, end poverty, and the loneliness that crushes the human spirit. Anyone who opposes this is choosing their own ego over humanity's future." On the other side, President Vasquez and Admiral Harrison stood firm. "Freedom isn't free," the president said in a speech that became famous worldwide. "The right to think our own thoughts, to make our own choices, to be individuals, These things are worth fighting for. Veltar continued his patient campaign, sending more ships with more invitations. The Confluent citizens on board never pushed or demanded. They simply existed as living examples of perfect peace and contentment. We do not wish to force anyone, Veltar explained in a global broadcast. Force is a primitive concept. We simply offer the choice. Why choose struggle when you can choose peace? Why choose loneliness when you can choose unity? Dr. Kim published her research on the brain scans of Confluent citizens. The data showed that individual identity had been essentially erased, replaced by a shared consciousness that was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. They're not lying when they say they're happy, she explained to a packed conference room. But it's not human happiness. It's the contentment of a river that has found the sea. Individual identity dissolved into something larger. The Confluence's response was patient and understanding. Of course our minds work differently, Veltar said. We have evolved beyond the primitive need for individual identity. Your scientist sees this as loss, but it is actually gain. Freedom from the prison of self. As months passed, the pressure on humanity grew. More and more worlds throughout the galaxy sent delegations to Earth, all offering the same message. Join us in harmony, end your suffering, become part of something greater. Some humans began to waver. The constant conflict and debate was exhausting. The news was filled with wars, disasters, and human misery. The Confluence offered an escape from all of it, but others dug in their heels harder. This is a test, Admiral Harrison told his staff. They're testing whether humanity has the strength to remain human when offered an easy way out. President Vasquez knew that time was running out. The Confluence was growing impatient with humanity's stubborn independence. Their messages, while still polite, carried a subtle undertone of concern. We worry for your species, Veltar said in his latest communication. How long will you choose to suffer when relief is offered? How long will you cling to chaos when harmony awaits? The question that haunted Earth's leaders was simple. What would happen when the Confluence's patience finally ran out? The meeting of the Symphonic Council was unlike any in their 1,000-year history. Representatives from 847 species sat in their great chamber on Harmony Station. But for the first time, their unity was cracked. Veltar stood before the council, his silver skin dulled with something that might have been frustration. 18 months have passed since first contact with humanity. They continue to refuse our gift. The voice that answered came from all directions at once as 800 minds spoke through the great resonance. This troubles us, Veltar of the crystalline. Never before has a species rejected harmony for so long. They are children, said Kethra of the flowing depths, her aquatic form rippling in its tank. Children who refuse medicine because it tastes bitter. They do not understand what is best for them. Perhaps, added Mordon of the Stone Eternal, we have been too patient. Their chaos spreads even to our own thoughts. Some of our younger species begin to ask uncomfortable questions. This was true, and it worried the Council deeply. The Zephyrian archive keepers had begun researching their own pre-integration history. A few Verdanian youth had been caught trying to block the resonance frequencies. Even some crystalline had reported strange dreams of individual thought. The humans are like a virus, declared Silneth of the Perfect Order. Their chaotic thinking infects everything they touch. They must be contained. Veltar felt an unusual sensation, something that took him a moment to recognize as doubt. The Confluence has never forced integration. It goes against our core principles, does it? Asked the collective voice. Our purpose is harmony. Our goal is the end of suffering. If a species is too primitive to choose correctly, are we not obligated to choose for them? The debate that followed lasted for days, which was itself unprecedented. Never before had the Council been unable to reach instant consensus. Finally, a decision was made by the narrowest margin in their history. The humans will be classified as temporarily discordant, the Council announced. For their own welfare and the safety of galactic harmony, they will be integrated by intervention. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Kim was working late in her laboratory when the first alerts came in. Sensors around the globe had detected unusual energy signatures approaching from space. Admiral Harrison, she said into her communicator, we have a problem. I'm reading massive electromagnetic anomalies heading for Earth. Within hours, objects began appearing in Earth's skies. They looked like giant tuning forks made of the same crystal material as the Harmony Station towers. They descended slowly, gracefully, taking positions above major population centers around the world. President Vasquez convened an emergency session with world leaders. The main screen showed dozens of the crystal structures hovering over cities from New York to Tokyo, from London to Mumbai. "Any response to our communications?" she asked. "Nothing, Madam President," reported Admiral Harrison. "They're not answering our hails, but our scientists are detecting low-frequency transmissions from each structure." Dr. Kim burst into the room, her tablet in hand. "I've analyzed the signals. They're broadcasting on frequencies that affect human brain chemistry. The same kind of patterns we saw in the Confluent citizens. Are they trying to control our minds?" asked the president. "Not control exactly," Dr. Kim said, studying her readings. "It's more subtle. The frequencies seem designed to reduce aggression, increase compliance, and promote group thinking." Admiral Harrison stood up. "They're trying to make us like them, turn us into their kind of peaceful zombies." Around the world, the effects began almost immediately. In the major cities beneath the crystal towers, people reported feeling unusually calm and peaceful. Crime rates dropped overnight. Protests and arguments seemed to fade away. Traffic moved more smoothly as drivers became more courteous, but not everyone was affected equally. Artists, writers, and creative types began experiencing severe headaches. Children became unusually quiet and docile. Mental health professionals reported a spike in patients complaining of feeling disconnected from themselves. Dr. Marcus Webb, leader of the Human Integration Movement, held a press conference beneath one of the towers in New York. "This is what we've been hoping for," he said, his expression serene. "Can't you feel it? The anger is gone. The hatred is fading. We're becoming better than we were." But even as he spoke, protesters gathered at the edges of the affected zones. They wore makeshift helmets lined with metal foil, desperately trying to block the alien frequencies. "Fight for your mind," shouted Maria Santos, a street artist whose work had become increasingly chaotic and disturbing since the towers arrived. "They're stealing who we are." Admiral Harrison ordered military strikes against the towers, but the crystalline structures seemed immune to conventional weapons. Missiles passed harmlessly through them as if they were made of light. Energy weapons simply reflected back at the attackers. Worse, the tower frequencies were growing stronger. The zones of effect expanded outward from each city center. People within the affected areas moved with increasing synchronization, their individual quirks and personalities smoothing away like sandcastles in the tide. Dr. Kim worked frantically to find a way to block or disrupt the signals. "It's not just electromagnetic," she reported to the Emergency Council. "There's a quantum component we don't understand. They're broadcasting on frequencies that exist in multiple dimensions." President Vasquez made the hardest decision of her life. All citizens in the affected zones are to evacuate immediately. "We're abandoning the major cities." The evacuation was chaos. Families were split apart, as some members had been too affected by the frequencies to want to leave. They couldn't understand why they should flee from such wonderful peace and harmony. Veltar finally broke his silence with a global broadcast. His image appeared on every screen on Earth, his expression sad but determined. "We did not want this," he said, "but your species leaves us no choice. You're like children playing with fire, refusing to let adults take the dangerous toys away. The galaxy cannot be complete while chaos remains." "You call it chaos," President Vasquez replied in her response. "We call it freedom. Freedom to suffer," Veltar said. "Freedom to make war. Freedom to hate and hurt each other. These are not gifts worth preserving." The real battle began when human military forces tried to establish refugee camps outside the tower zones. Confluence ships appeared in Earth's atmosphere, their movements perfectly coordinated. They didn't attack in any conventional sense. Instead, they simply prevented humans from interfering with the towers. Admiral Harrison led the defense personally, commanding a fleet of Earth's most advanced spacecraft. But fighting the confluence was like trying to catch smoke. Their ships moved in perfect harmony, anticipating every human strategy and countering it effortlessly. "They know what we're going to do before we do it," Harrison reported after another failed engagement. "It's like fighting a hive mind." But something unexpected began to happen. The same unpredictability that made humans chaotic also made them adaptable. Young pilots started making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. Commanders gave orders that made no tactical sense but somehow worked. Lieutenant Sarah Park, daughter of the late Commander Park, scored the first significant hit on a confluence ship by doing something completely irrational. She flew her fighter directly at the enemy vessel while playing loud rock music and making random course corrections based on the beat. Their perfect coordination is also their weakness, she reported excitedly. They can't predict chaos because chaos can't be predicted. Dr. Kim made another disturbing discovery. The towers aren't just affecting the people beneath them. They're learning from us. Each day the frequencies get more refined, more specifically targeted at human brain chemistry. As weeks passed, more than half of Earth's population had been affected by the expanding tower zones. The affected humans worked together with perfect efficiency, but they no longer seemed fully human. They spoke in measured tones, moved with synchronized grace, and showed no interest in art, music, or anything that couldn't serve the greater harmony. President Vasquez, now governing from a temporary capital in Australia, faced a terrible realization. They're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to save us. In their minds, they're doctors treating a disease called individual consciousness. The question was no longer whether humanity could resist the confluence's intervention. The question was whether anything recognizably human would survive their cure. Deep in the underground bunkers of the Australian outback, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked by the light of a single lamp. The president's daughter had always been brilliant with mathematics, but now she was racing against time to solve an equation that could save humanity itself. The pattern is there, she muttered, staring at screens full of data about the confluence towers. There has to be a pattern. Above ground, the world was changing. 3/4 of Earth's population now lived under the influence of the Harmony Towers. In the affected zones, crime had vanished, poverty was being efficiently managed, and conflict was a thing of the past. To an outside observer, it looked like paradise. But to the remaining free humans, it looked like the death of everything that made life worth living. Admiral Harrison coordinated the resistance from a mobile command center that moved constantly to avoid detection. The confluence ships still patrolled the skies, but they seemed content to let the towers do their work. Why fight when you could simply wait for your enemy to surrender their own minds? "Report from Sydney," came the voice of Captain Torres over the radio. "The affected population is working on some kind of construction project. Massive scale. They're building something. Any idea what?" Harrison asked. "Looks like a communications array, but bigger than anything we've ever seen." Dr. Sarah Kim, working from another hidden facility, had been monitoring brain patterns in the affected populations. Her latest findings were disturbing. "It's not just making them peaceful," she reported to the resistance leadership. "It's actually changing their brain structure. The neural pathways associated with individual identity are being smoothed over." "Permanently?" asked President Vasquez. "I don't know. Maybe. The longer someone is exposed, the deeper the changes become." Across the galaxy, cracks were forming in the confluence's perfect unity. The Zephyrian archive keepers had made a disturbing discovery while researching their pre-integration history. Archivist Zephlon stood before a collection of ancient data crystals that hadn't been accessed in millennia. As he absorbed the information, something unprecedented happened. He began to remember. His species hadn't always been part of the confluence. They had once been explorers, storytellers, keepers of diverse knowledge and different perspectives. The integration had come during a time of great crisis, promising peace and stability. But what did we lose? He whispered to himself. A question that would have been impossible for a fully integrated mind to ask. The memories were fragmentary and painful. He remembered the last Zephyrian to resist integration, his own ancestor, screaming warnings about the death of identity, even as the harmony frequencies overwhelmed her mind. Similar awakenings were happening across confluence space. Young Verdanians were having dreams of green forests where plants grew wild and free, instead of in perfect planned gardens. Some crystalline were experimenting with creating art that didn't follow the approved harmonic patterns. These stirrings of individual consciousness created something the confluence had never experienced. Doubt. On Earth, the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, the street artist who had been one of the first to resist the towers, was working on a mural in the underground tunnels when she made a discovery. "It's in the music," she said excitedly to Dr. Kim. "The tower frequencies. They're trying to create harmony, but they're doing it wrong. What do you mean? Real harmony in music isn't about everyone playing the same note. It's about different notes working together to create something beautiful. The towers are trying to make everyone play the same note. Dr. Kim realized the implications immediately. So if we could broadcast different notes, chaotic human notes, we might be able to disrupt their perfect harmony, Elena Vasquez finished, looking up from her calculations. But we'd need a way to reach not just Earth but the entire Confluence network. The answer came from studying the construction project in Sydney. The affected humans were building what appeared to be a massive amplification system for the harmony frequencies. It was designed to connect with similar arrays being built on Confluence worlds across the galaxy. They're planning to link the entire galaxy into one giant harmony network, Elena realized. Perfect synchronization across billions of light years. Admiral Harrison saw the opportunity immediately. If we could hijack that network, turn it against them, we'd need to get close to the array, Dr. Kim said. And we'd need someone who could interface with Confluence technology. The plan they developed was desperate and dangerous. A small team would infiltrate the Sydney construction site and attempt to broadcast human consciousness, raw, chaotic individual human thoughts and emotions, through the Confluence's own network. Dr. Marcus Webb, despite his support for integration, volunteered for the mission when he learned what the towers were really doing. I wanted harmony, not lobotomy, he said grimly. If they're erasing human consciousness entirely, then I was wrong. The infiltration team consisted of Webb, Elena Vasquez, and Lieutenant Sarah Park. They would have only minutes once they accessed the array before Confluence forces could stop them. As they approached Sydney, they could see how the city had changed. The affected humans moved like parts of a great machine, working on the massive array with perfect coordination. There were no guards because there was no need for them. Everyone in the city shared the same purpose. Remember, Elena whispered as they approached the central control chamber, we're not trying to destroy their network. We're trying to add our voices to it. The moment Elena connected her portable computer to the Confluence array, alarms began sounding across Harmony Station. Veltar felt the intrusion like a physical pain, a discordant note in the perfect symphony of Confluence thought. The humans are interfering with the resonance, he reported to the council. They're broadcasting chaos. What Elena had done was simple in concept but devastating in effect. Instead of trying to block the harmony frequencies, she had added the complete works of human art, music, literature, and personal expression to the broadcast. Beethoven's symphonies clashed with alien meditation tones. Shakespeare's passionate sonnets collided with Confluence peace mantras. The chaotic creativity of humanity flooded through the network like a virus. Across the galaxy, Confluence citizens experienced something they hadn't felt in millennia: individual emotion. The Zephyrian archive keepers suddenly remembered the joy of discovery. Verdanian artists recalled the thrill of creating something no one had ever imagined before. Even some crystalline felt the stirring of personal desire. Veltar himself was overwhelmed by the experience. For the first time in his life, he thought a thought that was truly his own. What if we were wrong? The effect spread faster than the Confluence could contain it. Citizens began questioning their perfect society. Some felt terror at the return of individual consciousness, desperately trying to reconnect to the Harmony network. Others felt liberation, like prisoners discovering their cell doors had never been locked. The Great Resonance, designed to maintain perfect unity, became a battlefield of competing ideas and emotions. The Symphonic Council found itself paralyzed as its members experienced conflicting thoughts for the first time in their existence. On Earth, the Harmony Towers began to flicker and fail as the network they were connected to collapsed into chaos. Affected humans stopped their synchronized movements, looking around in confusion as their individual personalities began to reassert themselves. But the victory came at a cost. The collapse of the Great Resonance left the galaxy in turmoil. Species that had known only peace for millennia suddenly found themselves dealing with conflict, disagreement, and the painful uncertainty of individual choice. What have we done? Webb asked as they watched reports flood in from across Confluence space. We gave them back their freedom, Elena replied, whether they wanted it or not. The question now was whether the galaxy could survive the return of chaos or if humanity had simply replaced one kind of suffering with another. Veltar stood alone in his private chambers on Harmony Station, experiencing something his species had forgotten existed: solitude. For the first time in his life, no other mind touched his. The silence was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. 3 months had passed since the human virus had shattered the Great Resonance. The galaxy was in chaos, but it was a different kind of chaos than anyone had expected. Species weren't destroying each other in wars. They were struggling with something far more fundamental: learning how to be individuals again. "Veltar," came a voice from his door communicator. It was Zephlon, the Zephyrian archivist who had become one of the first to embrace individual consciousness. "Enter," Veltar said, still marveling at the strange experience of speaking his own thoughts instead of sharing them. Zephlon looked different somehow. Where once his movements had been perfectly measured and calm, now there was an energy about him, an unpredictability that was both disturbing and fascinating. "I've been reviewing more of our ancient records," Zephlon said. "Before the integration, my people were remarkable. We created art, literature, music. We explored not just space, but ideas. We grew, and we also fought wars," Veltar pointed out. "We suffered. We died alone and afraid." "Yes," Zephlon agreed, "but we lived. Really lived. I've been wondering, what if growth requires struggle? What if peace without challenge is just another form of death?" On Earth, President Vasquez was dealing with her own crisis. The sudden return of individual consciousness to billions of humans had created massive confusion. People who had been peacefully coordinated for months suddenly found themselves arguing about everything from what to have for breakfast to how to rebuild their cities. But something remarkable was happening too. Art was exploding back into existence with a creativity that surpassed anything humanity had produced before. Musicians were composing symphonies that incorporated alien harmonics they had absorbed during their time in the resonance. Writers were crafting stories that blended human emotion with alien perspectives. Dr. Sarah Kim had made a discovery that changed everything. While studying brain scans of former Confluence citizens, she found that their experience with the Great Resonance hadn't erased their individual consciousness. It had expanded it. They remember what it felt like to think as one, she explained to the Emergency Council, but they also remember what it felt like to think alone. They've experienced both extremes. Some of them are finding a middle ground. Admiral Harrison was coordinating with scattered Confluence forces trying to maintain order across the galaxy. Half the species want to rebuild the old resonance. A quarter want to embrace complete chaos. The rest are trying to find something new. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A group of young Verdanians, led by a poet named Lyra, had begun experimenting with voluntary connection. Unlike the forced unity of the Great Resonance, they were learning to share thoughts and emotions by choice, linking minds temporarily for specific purposes. "We call it the harmony of choice," Lyra explained in a message that spread across the galaxy. "We can think alone when we need to be creative, original, individual. We can think together when we need to cooperate, build, or understand each other. The connection becomes a tool, not a prison." Veltar found himself drawn to this idea. He had experienced the beauty of the old resonance, but he had also tasted the freedom of individual thought. Perhaps there was a way to have both. The first test came when a crisis erupted on the mining world of Kepler 442b. Without the resonance to coordinate their activities, the automated mining systems had malfunctioned, threatening to poison the planet's atmosphere. The various species working there found themselves unable to cooperate effectively to solve the problem. "This is what comes of abandoning harmony," declared Silneth of the Perfect Order in a broadcast from her homeworld. "Chaos brings destruction. We must restore the Great Resonance before more worlds die." But Veltar had a different idea. He sent a message to Captain Sarah Chen, who was aboard the UES Defiance in Earth orbit. "We need your help," he said, words that no Confluence leader had ever spoken before. "Not your submission, your help. Teach us how to balance cooperation with independence." The joint mission to Kepler 442b became a model for everything that followed. Human engineers worked alongside crystalline technicians, but instead of perfect synchronization, they argued, debated, and disagreed their way to solutions. Zephyrian historians provided context while Verdanian artists found creative approaches that pure logic had missed. It wasn't efficient. It wasn't peaceful. There were hurt feelings, bruised egos, and heated arguments. But it worked. More than that, it produced innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. Dr. Elena Vasquez, working with a mixed team of human and alien scientists, made the discovery that would reshape galactic civilization. Individual consciousness isn't the opposite of unity, she announced to the Joint Council. It's the foundation of true cooperation. You can't choose to work together if you're not capable of choosing to work apart. The solution they developed became known as the New Symphony. Instead of one great harmonic network that controlled all thought, there would be many smaller networks that individuals and groups could join by choice. Species could maintain their individual cultures while cooperating on projects that required coordination. The Zephyrians created networks for sharing historical knowledge. The Verdanians built connections for environmental management. The Crystalline developed systems for engineering projects, and humans, with their chaotic creativity, served as bridges between different ways of thinking. Not everyone accepted the new way. About a third of former confluent species retreated to isolated worlds where they tried to rebuild the old resonance. Another group embraced complete individualism, rejecting any form of mental connection. But slowly, a majority found their way to the middle ground. Veltar stood once again before a great assembly, but this one was different from the old symphonic council. Representatives from hundreds of species sat in groups that shifted and changed as different issues required different perspectives. The chamber buzzed with conversation, argument, and the messy vitality of diverse minds working together. We gather today to formally establish the Galactic Accord, he announced, not as subjects of harmony but as partners in growth. The document they signed was nothing like the unity pledges of the old confluence. It guaranteed the right to individual thought, the freedom to disagree, and the choice to cooperate or work alone. It also established protocols for voluntary mental connection and shared projects. Dr. Marcus Webb, now serving as humanity's ambassador to the Accord, spoke for his species. We've learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of choice. The choice to argue, to disagree, to make mistakes, and to grow from them. As the ceremony concluded, Veltar experienced something new: hope. Not the certainty of perfect outcomes that the Great Resonance had provided, but the excitement of unknown possibilities. The galaxy was no longer seeking harmony. It was learning to dance with chaos. 6 months later, the UES Defiance departed Sol System on a new mission. Its crew was mixed: humans, crystalline, Zephyrians, and a dozen other species. They were heading for the Galactic Rim, where rumors spoke of other civilizations that had never known the confluence. Captain Chen stood on the bridge, watching the stars ahead. "Any idea what we'll find out there?" asked Commander Park. "No idea at all," Chen replied with a smile. "And that's exactly what makes it worth doing." Behind them, Earth and the former confluence worlds continued their great experiment, learning to be individuals while choosing to be partners. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was alive, growing, and beautifully, chaotically human. The galaxy had sought harmony and found something better. Symphony. Not the perfect note of unified consciousness, but the rich, complex music of diverse minds choosing to play together. And in that choice, humanity had given the galaxy its greatest gift, not the surrender of chaos to order, but the transformation of both into something entirely new.